What do you need? I'll talk about what I know, which is not much. Hey, sir. One last mic check before he gets here. If you need more, it's too bad.
You guys need a white balance? Anybody need a white balance? Good. You good?
Good afternoon. I want to start by thanking members of the faith community that have joined me today. They include Rabbi Peter Berg from the Temple, Reverend Eric Thomas of St. Peter Missionary Baptist Church, who has joined us today, Pastor Leland Jones, Sr. of Greater New Light Missionary Baptist Church, Pastor Gabriel Hardeman of Turner Chapel AME is with us, Pastor Hampton of First Baptist Church of Stewardship, and Dr. Darrell Elligan of True Light Baptist Church, and Joshua Noblet of St. Mark United Methodist Church have joined us today, and it means a lot to have distinguished members of the faith community at a very challenging time in the life of the city of Atlanta, the state, indeed the country. I also want to extend my personal gratitude to the special agent in charge of the FBI, Mr. Britt Johnson, for coming to join us as well, and also a distinguished leader of the Georgia State Patrol, Commissioner of the Department of Public Safety, Mark McDonough, for being beside me today. I want to start by expressing my sorrow and concern over the deaths of 5 law enforcement officers in Dallas, Texas last night. I have reached out and sent a note to Mayor Rawlings, who is a longtime friend of mine through the U.S. Council of Mayors. Our prayers in the city of Atlanta go out to the victims and their families as they go through a tragedy that none of us want to ever face or see. Our thoughts are also with the 12 other officers and their families who were injured in Dallas, Texas in the line of fire last night. I want them to know that the city of Atlanta extends its full support to every single one of them, and that we hope that God covers them through this tragedy. I want to take a moment to thank the women and men of the Atlanta Police Department for their bravery and professionalism in protecting the peace and keeping our residents and visitors safe during a peaceful protest last night in Piedmont Park. All of the reports that we had are that about 200 people gathered in the Civic Center parking lot, peacefully marched to Piedmont Park. It really was a special occasion from all reports and was well done. About 9:35 to 9:45 last night, the protest was breaking up, and then a group of protesters decided that they wanted to continue to exercise their First Amendment rights and went on a walk through the city of Atlanta. The crowd swelled to about 1,500 individuals at its high. That's the information that we had. And I think that the Atlanta Police Department and our partners at the Georgia State Patrol did an exceptional job in terms of being restrained and disciplined while allowing individuals to express the frustration that many people are feeling right now. The information we have this afternoon is that there were 0 arrests related to protests in the city of Atlanta. And I think the credit for that, once again, goes to our law enforcement professionals. I also want to say a bit about Chief Turner and his leadership team, and Chief Baker and Chief Labatt with the city of Atlanta. The city of Atlanta's police department mirrors the population of the city of Atlanta and invests a great deal in training for situations just like the one that we're facing right now. During my last briefing to you, I expressed to you that we had doubled the size of our SWAT unit, that we had increased our long gun capability with officers up to 75 individuals. And all of this training and work we're doing is proving to be more and more important to date. But there's another statistic that I think is very important that the people of Atlanta hear right now. In all of 2015, the men and women of the Atlanta Police Department fired their weapons a total of 9 times. So our officers, in interactions with the public that total some 40,000.
No, sir, about 1.5 million accounts.
Excuse me, 1.5 million, fired their weapons 9 times. And I really hope that you include that in your comments and that the people of Atlanta are listening to this, because I want you to know the kind of police department that you have. And I think it's really important that we deal with the women and men that keep us safe in the fashion that they deal with us. And this is information that is not often shared. We will be available for questions as we go throughout the day. And I wanted you to know that we will also brief you on events related to the Piedmont Park death. The Fulton County Medical Examiner's Office is in the process of doing its critical work to bring that matter to resolution. But I want to be very clear, and I want to repeat, that we have not seen anything that suggests foul play regarding the death of this young man. But I intend to keep the public fully informed as the process evolves and as we learn more. Chief Turner, after the body of the young man was discovered on yesterday, we made the judgment that it was best to call in our partners at the FBI, because we did not want there to be a hint of any cover-up or impropriety regarding this matter. Those individuals were willing to take on this investigation, and so the FBI will be managing that process. But I've been following internet, social media chatter, and they're just saying a bunch of things that are not true. And so we have Lieutenant Crair, who's here today, who's going to walk you through what happened on that scene in a really slow and deliberate fashion. There's another point that I want to make that has also been growing on social media. We have found no evidence to the rumors of any KKK involvement in Piedmont Park on Wednesday night. So we have reviewed our video cameras, we have spoken to a number of individuals, and we have not found any evidence that the KKK was in Piedmont Park distributing materials. These 2 points are very important right now. We're in a very delicate environment in the city of Atlanta, and we need everyone, including individuals who are on social media, not just our partners in the press, to be honest and accurate and care about what you're putting out. So once again, regarding the unfortunate death of this young man, we have not prejudged it, but there is no evidence of foul play thus far, and the case has been turned over to the FBI. Regarding the allegation that the Ku Klux Klan was distributing or leafleting material in Piedmont Park, there is no evidence that that has been occurring. And I would like all of your help and the help of the members of the Atlanta City Council who are here with me today, really to push back against those untruths. With that, I would like to introduce the Atlanta Police Department's Major Crair to discuss the events involving the young man's untimely death night before last. Major Crair.
Good afternoon. Approximately 4:50 a.m. Thursday morning, the July 7th, the security officers that are assigned inside Piedmont Park, that are employed by Piedmont Park, discovered a male hanging from a tree just off Charles Allen and 10th Street inside the park. They immediately called that find in to our 911 center, and we dispatched our Morning Watch Zone 5 officers to the scene. Upon arrival on the scene, they found the gentleman hanging from the tree, and we called in our overnight GI, General Investigator Squad, who are very seasoned detectives and handle many of these cases, to come out and investigate the initial scene, along with the Fulton County Medical Examiner's Office. The conclusion of their investigation that evening was there was no evidence whatsoever of any foul play, and everything evidence-wise was consistent with a suicide on the scene itself. Some of that evidence included Herbie Kirby that was next to the body with his footprint on top of that Herbie Kirby. And then also he had a backpack with rope that was similar to the rope that he had used to hang himself from the tree. So we are not releasing that name yet. Next of kin has not been notified. The ME's office is still doing their diligent work to wrap this up. But again, through our investigation and through the reports on the investigators on the scene. There is absolutely no evidence that this was anything but a suicide. Thank you.
Good evening. I just want to make a brief statement really concerning the status that we find ourselves in around America with law enforcement and our citizens' encounters. In my 35 years of policing, I don't believe we've ever been in a place like this. Our heart goes out to the men and women that are struggling in Dallas to deal with the deaths of the 5 officers as well as the individuals that was wounded during last night's event. You know, for the last few years, the actions of a few officers simply do not define more than 850,000 law enforcement sworn officers throughout our country. I think what we have to do is think about what these men and women do every day. They leave their homes to provide a professional environment and a safe environment for all of our citizens throughout the country that they protect and serve, as well as provide for the visitors that come into their city. We do need to think about how we move in a different direction concerning this citizens police encounter. First of all, I'm confident that we've got to do a better job of communicating with each other. And that starts with the outcry of our pastors being here, our clergy, making sure that we're communicating with each other, finding ways to have a better conversation around how we do our work more efficiently. And then we also need to educate our public on what the encounters that we're having with officers and how they should respond to officers. We have to push back the social media piece concerning all the violence against officers. Last night in Dallas was no different than what we saw in Atlanta, and I'll tell you what I mean by that. We had a small group of protesters that decided to gather at Woodruff Park, and they began to walk to Piedmont Park. No different than what happened in Dallas. They went away to a location, made a statement. The police department was there to protect this democracy, to give a person an opportunity to exercise their First Amendment rights. And as they returned, the officers that was leading and working traffic was ambushed. That literally could have happened in our city. I'm so thankful for a sense of reason that take place in our city. I want to encourage folk as we move through today and throughout the weekend, and there are other demonstrations that will take place, that people have a right to peacefully protest and demonstrate. But if you choose to not be peaceful, you need to know that we are prepared to deal with any acts of violence in a vigilant way, but professional. So our intent tonight and throughout this weekend is to provide the public safety for our city and for the visitors that are here in this city. My heart go out to Chief Brown. I did also reach out to Chief Brown in Dallas today. He is so busy, and I'm sure we'll get a chance to talk later today. He's a good friend of mine. I think we both became chiefs at the same time in our prospective cities. And we've had a number of talks concerning what's going on in our city. And my heart go out to him and his command staff and all the men and women there in Dallas. So with that said, I wanted to make sure that our citizens and our visitors clearly understand that the men and women that are represented here today, we are here to protect and serve the citizens of Atlanta. We have a really aggressive plan. We've moved to do a number of things differently than we've done in the past. We're confident that we've got a good plan in place. We just ask that the citizens, our visitors, are patient and that you give us an opportunity to work with you as you demonstrate your First Amendment rights. Thank you.
I want to join Chief Turner in thanking the Atlanta Police Department once again for its conduct during the protest in Atlanta last night over the deaths of 2 young black men, Alton Sterling and Philando Castile. As we go forward, it's important to remind ourselves that peaceful assembly and nonviolent protest is part of the American fabric and is in the DNA in the city of Atlanta. That said, it's important to remind citizens that peaceful protest also means following the instructions of law enforcement officers on the street. Peaceful and respectful protest is restricted to public property, not private property, and we will not tolerate the destruction of any property or any unlawful forms of protest in our city. We're human, just like you all are, and we understand that this is a painful time in America, but it's also an appropriate time to address the problems of inequity facing our society. That does not mean taking our frustration out on law enforcement officials. We do not need, at this time, to lean toward being divisive. We need to be the best versions of ourselves. And I was thinking about it the other day because Ambassador Andrew Young just stopped by my office, and he talked about all of the work that he and Dr. King did. And one of the things that happened last night that is deeply troubling to me is this desire for a small number of individuals to walk onto our freeways. Now, I will tell you, Ambassador Young is in Atlanta last night. Several months ago, before Willie Bolden died, a person who actually walked across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, I had him meet with a group of young protesters. And Willie Bolden, who Dr. King met in a pool parlor, said, "We never would have done what individuals do who walk into a highway. It is fundamentally unfair to everyone. It puts the protesters at risk. It puts the women and men of our police department at risk. And it puts people who are completely innocent, who are driving on a freeway, trying to get to a loved one. And this applies to every single person in this room. Just imagine if you and your wife were driving down 7585 with your kids in your car, and you had to hit the brakes because someone decided that it was an appropriate form of protest to run into 7585. And so I want to send a clear message. I have sat with people who have literally bled for our freedoms. I have sat with people who have literally held hands and locked arms with Martin Luther King. And this behavior around our freeways is not going to be tolerated, and it's something they would have never engaged in. Ambassador Young told me that almost a quarter of the time related to every march was related to safety, the safe execution of protest, and a knowledge that when they broke the law, they were going to be arrested. He also told me that they had an obligation when you are protesting to be arrested in a civil fashion. And so we've been communicating with our law enforcement officers, and we are clearly trying to show restraint on our side. But in this narrow area, I really do plead with you to maintain the Kingian tradition of protest. The Kingian tradition of protest, which means that you respect the laws of the community that you are protesting in while maintaining your commitment to your mission and to your expression of the First Amendment. With that, I will yield for any questions.
Mayor, your police command issued that warning earlier, previous arrests regarding highways. Wouldn't an arrest or two of some of those who went to the highways send a strong message last night?
You know, I'm not going to second guess my team. I'm not the one standing in a freeway. They are. But what I am going to say is that, Morris, we haven't approached this issue lightly. It's the one aspect of our experience last night and another protest that we need to do better at as a community. And it's why I took special time to focus on it. It's why I took time to talk to other leaders of the civil rights movement and to have them engage with people who are protesting, because that is a part of who we are as the city of Atlanta. And I just wanted to kind of check myself and to go and talk to other members of the civil rights community and ask them to tell me how you felt, because I believe that many of the frustrations may very well be valid. But you know, we've got law enforcement personnel, and 99.9% of them are doing exactly what we need to do and protecting us every day and putting it all on the line. And so there are those who protest, and I agree with some of those protests, that when you find out that's very small part of a percent that isn't standing up to the best traditions of our law enforcement group, we need to act decisively and fairly and weed them out. So I'm not saying you can't protest. I'm just saying there are rules to it. But regarding the decision to arrest last night, I'm not going to second guess the folks that were actually standing in the freeway. But what I am going to do is to make it very clear in no uncertain terms that if you engage in that behavior, we're going to act in a decisive fashion.
Mayor, Chief Turner spoke briefly about strategy changes after the events in Dallas. Chief, were you able to talk about in any detail some of the changes you're making to how you approach tonight, the protest tonight?
You will see us engaging in the same form. We will not have tactical gear if you're thinking that we're going to do that. We're not. We are confident we have to be more tactical in the way that we apply our resources in the areas of these demonstrations. It will be very rare that you'll be able to tell what we're doing differently. I'll just say it that way. But we're clearly going to be doing various different tactics different to protect our officers as well as the individual protesters that are out.
Chief, on everyday patrol, would it be desirable to put 2 police officers to a vehicle, and can you do that?
Well, Morris, clearly when you have more people, 2 people to a car, our officers are safer. We have moved in some of our beats that we do have 2 officers patrolling. Our patrol pattern right now at this time, we patrol 1 vehicle at a time, 1 officer at a time.
Hey, Chief, when it comes to just the feeling among your officers and your command staff and where you were when this happened, can you take us through where you were and the feelings? I mean, you said you're friends with the Dallas Police Chief.
Absolutely. I tell you, of course, Major Crair was on the streets as incident commander last night, and we had a chance to just debrief this morning. And he began to talk about the sentiments of the officers throughout the night, as well as this morning as he stood roll call with his officers. Our officers feel that they are under attack, but they are very professional in the work that they are providing and the service that they are rendering to our citizens. I was actually in a very, very bad place when I heard that our officers in Dallas was attacked in the way that they were. My heart immediately went out to the chief as he began to wrestle with all of the challenges that took place in Dallas, and they continue to take place there. I will say this, that one of the most compelling points that he made, he talked about protecting the democracy, and that's what we're sworn to do. And then at the same time, he began to talk about standing as a pillar in their community. And I believe that's what we do in law enforcement. I believe that this is the most noble profession one could choose. We're struggling all around the country to people to choose to come into this profession because of the attacks that that's being placed on officers.
Do you fear this is going to make it worse?
I believe that I can't predict, but I will tell you that the challenge that we're seeing around the country in our ranks, it's very challenging to meet the obligations to bring professional police officers on. We will not relax our standard on the people that we bring into the police department around this country, specifically in Atlanta. And so young people are choosing to do different things.
As a person of color, though, how has it impacted you, too? Because you're not only the chief, but you're a man of color.
For me personally, I think, you know, looking at the 2 incidents that all of these demonstrations have brought to the forefront of all of us is very disturbing when I first saw each one of those situations. I just encourage our citizens and the community abroad and throughout the nation to literally allow these processes to take place. I think every last one of our citizens have an obligation that we are accountable to you all. that you give us an opportunity to do investigations, conclude those investigations, and act appropriately when we find individuals that are stepping out of line according to the policies that we've set forth. We have always been very forthcoming in this city concerning our actions and holding our officers accountable. I don't want to ever get in a place of thinking that we are throwing our officers under the bus. Our officers know that we will support them to the best of our ability when it's time for us to support them, but when it's time to take a bad apple off of the police department, and we have done that consistently during my administration and the mayor's administration.
Can you give us some sense of what, when you have your shift meetings, when your officers are arriving today, what you're saying to them about Dallas and what concerns they're expressing?
We're telling our officers to stay vigilant and stay professional, and make sure that you remember your tactics. I began to talk about the training that we have moved to, situational and awareness training, scenario-based training, preparing our officers to deal with situations before they ever get to the streets, giving them that stress in a practical situation before it becomes reality. And because of that, the mayor gave you some numbers of last year. We had 9 officer-involved shootings last year, and 2 of those were fatal, unfortunately. But the fact is, when you think about the total number of officers that we have on our streets and the hours that they work, that is an amazing stat. And I would say that there are very few major cities around the country that will have fewer encounters as we did.
Are your officers very upset about what happened in Dallas, obviously?
Our officers are concerned, and as I am concerned, upset absolutely, but professional in driving and making sure that they are delivering services to the citizens that we were sworn to protect and serve. Okay.
The reaction on social media to this young man's death in Piedmont Park earlier this week, how much did that influence your decision to call in the FBI, especially considering that all signs do seem to point to suicide at this point?
I wasn't driven by social media. The chief and I talked early that morning, and because of the circumstances, we didn't know, I thought that the cleanest decision, candidly, was to have the FBI as a partner. The only difference is initially the chief and I discussed having parallel cases, and then after thinking that through by about 11 o'clock, we thought that it was best that the city of Atlanta take a complete hands-off approach and leave that to our partners at the FBI. There really wasn't a question as to whether or not the FBI would be involved, at least on our side. Fortunately, we have terrific partners, and they were willing to help us in that regard. Now, just to show you that we didn't just come to this conclusion, Chief Turner made the decision a long time ago that when there's an officer-involved shooting, that he would have GVI as a partner during the course of the investigation. So this isn't anything that is new or inconsistent with the standards that we're implementing within our public safety departments.
But an officer-involved shooting is very different than a suicide.
I understand, but I was just trying to give you my thinking as to why I felt that we needed someone who was removed from the department.
Mr. Mayor?
The most frustrating part of social media just has been the amount of false information that's being spread so rapidly. It's a classic example of a lie getting around the world before the truth wakes up.
Mr. Mayor, during the quiet moment of this week, you saw what was happening in Dallas last night. Do you ever get a chance to stop and think, what would you do do you ever get a personal reaction, or do you have to be there the whole time?
I think it's my job to do my job. I said in this very room that as of Friday, November 13th in Paris, the job of every mayor of any city in America has changed forever. I don't want to get in trouble with the special agent in charge, but the special agent in charge came and gave me a briefing on the Paris attacks that was one of the most chilling briefings that I've experienced as a mayor of the city. And so what it means is that Chief Turner and I talk more than I prefer to, but not because I don't like him, but because when he calls my phone, it's rarely good. It's just not the nature of the relationship. So my job has changed forever. And it just comes with the territory. I've said over and over that I do believe that our law enforcement personnel are just being called on to do incredible things because they're going to have to do what they did last night, which was to go towards the fire. And that the career of law enforcement personnel is going to call on them to be first responders in situations where they're frequently outgunned because of the nature of the weapons that are on the street right now. Right? So before SWAT gets there, it's going to be that person in a patrol car that arrives on the scene. And they're dealing with someone that has the kind of weapons that are being used in Afghanistan and in Iraq. And so it's deeply impacted me. I always respected our law enforcement personnel, but being in this job, I have a much deeper understanding of how hard their job is, which is why, as upset and as angry as people might be, can't paint a broad brush on these women and men, because they do something that is fundamental to the healthy operation of our community. And I won't even start talking about the end-to-end encryption devices that we're now having to deal with as law enforcement, where messages that could have been interrupted in the past are now protected. So their jobs are just much harder. And so, you know, when we see things that are terrible and wrong, we need to do something about it. And I believe that the police officers that stand with us want bad apples weeded out. They don't want to be smeared and have to walk around in fear because someone's lashing out about something that happened in Louisiana or something that happened in Minnesota. And so that's how I feel.
Mayor, is it a good idea for those who may want to demonstrate to leave their kids at home?
I think it is, Morris. I think it is. I think that if it were me, I don't want to tell folks not to go out and protest. There are a number of protests planned today, but I would do so in a safe fashion, and I would let the police do their job. But there are also copycats in the world. And right now, all over the world, people are watching what happened in Dallas, Texas last night. And in the environment that we're currently in, it's not impossible that someone would choose to replicate that behavior. So everybody who's out protesting needs to understand that we're going to work real hard to make sure that we treat each other civilly, but we're going to have to treat each other civilly. But I wouldn't bring my children to a protest right now.
Mr. Mayor, the Justice Department with Loretta Lynch just about a week ago announced that they're going to have what's called unconscious bias training for all folks. Do you think the city needs that? And talk about the conversation of racial attitudes here in Atlanta. Do you think
Yes.
that's happening?
Yes, we have that training as a part of our standards and procedures right now. Regarding the issues of race, there are many and multifold, but what I can tell you is that we're going to have to act decisively in instances where it is found by an appropriate trier of fact that one of our officers behaved in behavior that's unacceptable. At the exact same time, we cannot paint a broad brush over the 99.9% of the women and men that do this job honorably and at great risk and peril to themselves. And if we're thoughtful and if we lean towards each other, we're capable of that. I just think we're going to have to work harder at it. And I think that we're going to have to be much more thoughtful and vigilant. And we're also going to have to push back on a new element in this conversation, which is social media. People offering opinions that are just not well-based in fact, and people offering opinions that are thoughtful and serious. It's added an entirely new dimension. It's done the same thing to your profession. It's added an entire new dimension to ours.
Mayor, you mentioned the Paris attacks and how that's changed your job and making the jobs of mayors around the city. Yeah. What are some of the things that you had to learn and adapt to since that's happened?
First of all, your officers need to have what they need. So right now, 52% of the City of Atlanta's general fund budget is spent on public safety. Prior to the Paris attacks, the long guns at Hartsfield-Jackson Airport were locked in a room, which meant that if something happened, our officers had to go back to get the equipment that they needed to address a situation. Prior to the Paris attacks, our SWAT units take about 30 to 45 minutes to deploy because they're used to dealing with a crisis situation where there's someone hunkered down. The chief and I met, and we said, Chief, we've got to have a capability that acts faster, because if you're really being candid, and if you look at the reports regarding ISIL and other terrorists, they're trying to kill as many people as possible, so we have an obligation to eliminate them as quickly as possible. That's different than SWAT. Our long gun capability was doubled. The pay for individuals who went through this training was increased. So all of those were concrete responses to the fact that more than 100 people were killed in about 45 minutes. So if you look at the briefing around Paris, you had 3 to 4 different cells that killed 100 people in less than 50 minutes time. And if that doesn't change your behavior as mayor, you need to do another job. And fortunately, the members of City Council have approved every appropriation that we have made. So we have about 1,940 officers. We're close to the biggest department that we've had in history. And if I can have more officers, I'll get even more. We've done a number of pay adjustments to officers because you all know that was a long-running part of their morale issue. I've raised the starting salary from $34,000 to $41,000 in the last budget for our officers. We had a compression issue among our officers. I addressed that. We had an issue with our sergeants' morale. I addressed that. All of that really came out of, as I said, I always had a respect for police officers. But when I get a call, what I'm asking them to do is fundamentally different, in my opinion, post-Paris, in Brussels, in Orlando, in Dallas, San Bernardino. There were frontline police officers involved in all of those incidents. Some guy, some woman who got up that day thinking they were just going to do a regular job on the police department. But when bad things started happening, they were the ones that got the call to go show up, not me or you. So I'm going to try to be better, and I'm really asking the public, let's look at the whole picture, folks. And to young folks out there who've been on social media, I'm a black man too. I know what it is to be a black man. But it doesn't mean that you take your frustrations out by harming other people. It does mean it is perfectly fine to make a demand for fairness and equal treatment of black citizens who are being disproportionately impacted in a particular manner that relates to the likelihood of a black person dying in an interaction with law enforcement. Right? So that's not an attack, that's just data. Let's fix it. What can we do to make it better? And I think that is the appropriate use of our energy and our passion. And I'm willing to operate in that space and do what I can. Thank you all so much for your time and attention today. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.